Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible study. This is part 2 of my Bible study on Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Now the reason why this came up is because in the weeks leading up to Palm Sunday, we had 3 weeks ago, the 11th chapter of John on the raising of Lazarus. And then the next week after that, we had the beginning of the 12th chapter of John, which is Mary of Bethany anointing Jesus' feet with costly ointment and wiping them with her hair. And so this last Sunday on Palm Sunday, I went ahead and just used John's account of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem on the donkey and tried to tie these stories together. Now I've been working on the chronology of it in a new way too, for myself, getting prepared for this, and I'm on to something again that I never knew. I'll be unwrapping that for you in the days ahead. But I'm trying to figure out the exact timeline of what Jesus did on Passover week. Rebecca and I spent some time this morning because she's been trying to post a timeline on her Facebook page of what happens on each day of Holy Week. And in the process of trying to answer some of her questions, I found a whole new resource of a guy who's just like me and wants to know the exact history of the happenings of the life of Jesus, that he's done a massive amount of research, and it's available on his online blog that I stumbled onto by accident this morning. So I've got about a 24-page paper that I'm going to read about the dates of Holy Week. It's so much fun for me. So I hope that you enjoy this too, because if I talk to this camera and you all enjoy listening to it, then that's less time. I used to spend all this time talking at my wife and driving her crazy, okay? Oh, I can't believe what I just discovered. All right, so now all of you can have this information in bite-sized pieces, because you can push stop and think about what I've done and then push play instead of having to listen to me for two straight hours. So, all right. So we're moving into part 2, and I'll just do a little quick wrap up of, I was talking about how understanding these 4 gospels, there's inside information, there's insider core, and I believe that I know that John's gospel was the last of the 4 to be written, and I really believe that Matthew, Mark, and Luke left a lot of open questions for people that John probably got asked, because John was the last of the original 12 disciples to die, and he lived to a ripe old age. He was exiled on the island of Patmos for some years and suffered there, but he was released when a new Caesar came to power, and he moved from that exile on the island of Patmos, living in a cave, to the city of Ephesus in Asia Minor, where he moved in with Philip the evangelist and his 4 daughters, and John lived out his life and died well into his 90s. I don't know at what age he wrote the Gospel of John, but it seems to me that in many cases he tries to tie together the loose ends of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I've been finding that he's very specific about some of his timeline information. So now in this second part, we're going to talk about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus from the standpoint of how much information do we actually have about these people. And it's amazing, just like the Christmas stories. I mean, remember, and those of you that have heard my Christmas preaching, we've got Matthew 1 and 2 and Luke 1 and 2. We have 4 chapters, out of which we get our entire nativity narrative and all of the surrounding information out of 4 gospels. That's it, 4 chapters. And with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, we really only specifically have 3 chapters. Now the first chapter I'm going to read to you from is from Luke, the 10th chapter. So I've been talking a lot about John, but the most famous and popular story about Mary and Martha is not in the Gospel of John, it's in the Gospel of Luke. And in Luke chapter 10, here we go. Luke chapter 12, Luke chapter 10, and verses 38 through 42. Now, not even a full chapter on Mary and Martha. I mean, really, what do we got there? 4 verses? That's all we have. This is such a popular story, but it really only covers about 4 verses. Okay, starting at verse 38. Now, as they were traveling along, he entered a certain village. Doesn't say the name of the village here. And a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister named Mary, who moreover was listening to the Lord's word, seated at his feet. But Martha was distracted with all of her preparations, and she came up to him, Jesus, and said to him, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Then tell her to help me. But the Lord said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only a few things are necessary, and really only one. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. That's it. The story of Martha the server and Mary the sitter. Mary sits at Jesus' feet and listens to him talking and teaching and conversing with his disciples, while Martha is left to do all the grunt work to feed 13 hungry men plus her own family. And she's not very happy about it. And she says, Lord, are you really going to just let her sit there? Tell her to get up and help me. And Jesus disappoints her. Martha, 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 you're worried about all the wrong things. There's really only one thing that's important, and she's chosen it. She's chosen the good portion. I'm not going to take it away from her. Now, if you were Martha, would you have just slapped, ripped off your apron and thrown it on the floor and stormed out of the house and said, fix your own dang supper then? But that famous passage of scripture has become the reason that most of the ladies' Bible study circles in the churches that I've known and been part of in my life, which is 12, 13, 14 churches now, almost every church has a Mary circle and a Martha circle. Right? And they tend to attract the women. The Martha circles tend to attract the ones who like to do the quilting and the doing and the sewing and the Mary circles kind of the free-spirited, maybe they do Bible study or maybe they just have dinner together. Okay? Catered dinner because Martha's not going to cook for them. That's all there is about Mary and Martha in the Gospel of Luke. 4 verses. I've read the story to you. Now, the second chapter of the Bible that contains information on Mary and Martha also includes Lazarus. Now, notice in Luke chapter 10, not a word about Lazarus. You wouldn't even know that these two women have a brother at all. But now, we go to the 11th chapter of John, and we get the largest and longest single insight into who Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are. We hear about all 3 of them. I'm going to read the chapter for you, and I'm not going to go into the depth I did. If you want that, I'll upload the sermon from John chapter 11, and you can go back and read that. But I do want to, in the context of this Bible study, read this entire chapter so that you can pick up the narrative and connect it to Luke chapter 10 that we just read. Double checking here to make sure, yep, I'm at about the 9-minute mark. Everything's going good on the recording. So, now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany. Now we know where they lived. The certain village of Luke chapter 10, where Martha and Mary live, is the village of Bethany. Aha! Now we know where that is. It's up the Mount of Olives and across the mesa at the top of the flat a little ways, about 2 to 2.5 miles from the gates of Jerusalem. All right, little village called Bethany. Certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, of the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. It's interesting, doesn't say that Martha was his sister too, but the sisters, therefore, sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. There's another little insight. So, obviously, Jesus has a real tight relationship. He's best buds with their brother. Okay? When Jesus heard of it, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of Man may be glorified by it. Now, also, here's some more insight. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So not only was he tight with Lazarus, he also had a deep fondness in his heart for both Mary and Martha, which suggests that he'd been at their house for more than just one dinner. I would think that every time he's in the neighborhood of Jerusalem, this is probably his headquarters. These are people that he can count on, okay? So it says here, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed then 2 days longer in the place where he was. And then after this, he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea again. See, now Judea is the area, the southern part of Israel, where the city of Jerusalem is. And it was where the most hardcore, persnickety Jewish people lived. In fact, there's even a pecking order that can be delineated amongst the Jews. If you were a Judean Jew, you were at the top of the pyramid. Okay? That was the best that you could be. Being a Jew was the best that you could be in the world, but being a Judean Jew, oops, I lost my connection. I got to reconnect. All right, I hope there's not too much of a glitch there. I'm not going to try to go back. I lost my connection and had to restart it again, but it's picking right up where it left off. So, all right, go back. I'll go back just a little bit here. Now, if you were a Judean Jew, you were at the top of the pecking order. And then the next in the line there would be the Galilean Jews. Galilean Jews considered themselves superior. Well, probably didn't consider themselves superior to Judean Jews, but there was a rivalry between Galilean Jews, which is what Jesus and his disciples mostly were, and Judean Jews. After that came the Jews that lived out in the hinterlands of the Roman Empire. The Western diaspora, which was in the Roman Empire, and the Eastern diaspora, which was in the Parthian Empire. But there were literally millions of Jewish people that lived spread out all over the known world at that time. But those Greek-speaking Jews, or the Jews from the East, who spoke Aramaic, those Aramaic Jews were probably even a little more up on the level than the Greek-speaking Jews. But you can see this pecking order, especially when you read the book of Acts, okay? So he's coming back into Judea because that's where his biggest enemies are, all right? The Jewish leadership lives close to Jerusalem. And as long as he stays out in the hinterlands, in Galilee or Samaria, he's a little bit outside of their reach. But when he comes into the area around Jerusalem, he's within their power. And obviously, they were able to take him down and crucify him in the days ahead. So he comes back into Judea after he waits in the place where he was. It says, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he therefore heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now, he did that deliberately, right? We'll find that out. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going there again? And Jesus answered and said, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. This he said, and after that he said, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go that I might awaken him out of sleep. And the disciples said to him, Well, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. Now Jesus had spoken of Lazarus' death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus then therefore said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. So now let us go to him. All right, now I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. Now, when Jesus when Jesus arrived in Bethany, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So that curious waiting 2 days after he got the news, he didn't just set right out. Even if Jesus had set out immediately, he still would have gotten to Bethany 2 days too late. But by waiting the extra 2 days, he's now arrived with Lazarus 4 days dead, and he did it intentionally. We talk about that in the other sermon. So Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was come, now here's Martha from Luke chapter 10, right? Are you going to let her sit there and not help me? Martha, Martha, you're worried about too many things. There's only one thing that's important, right? This is the same Martha, all right? So she comes and she says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Now do you know why I think that she said it more like this? Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. No nonsense about this lady. At least that's how I see her. Okay? And now she says, but even now I know whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha says to him, I know that he'll rise again at the resurrection on the last day. And that's where I think she's like, well, fat lot of good that'll do me. I need him here right now. I'm an unmarried woman with an unmarried sister who doesn't know how to cook, and he's our sole source of support and protection, and now he's dead. Fat lot of good that's going to do me. If you'd have got here when I called for you the first time, you wouldn't be dead. So, here we go. So then Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. He who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And then Martha's true self comes out, her faith. And she says, yes, Lord. I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. And then she goes back to her home where Mary's waiting, and she calls her sister Mary secretly, and she says to her, the teacher's here and he's calling for you. Now remember who Mary is from Luke chapter 10. She's this tender-hearted girl who gets so caught up in what Jesus is saying and teaching that she sits down at his feet with the men and lets Martha do all the work. And there's a big part of the story that's involved in that. But for right now, I just want you to understand, Martha goes back and she says to Mary, and Mary, I truly think if there was ever somebody that he had fallen in love with, it was this Mary. Not Mary Magdalene, and we're going to talk about Mary Magdalene, but it was this Mary of Bethany. He just seems to have a tender spot in his heart for her. And she comes, and we pick it up here, and he says, verse 29, when Mary heard it, she arose quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. And when the Jews who were with Mary in the house, consoling her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep. But therefore, when Mary came to where Jesus was, she saw him And she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Oh Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died." Now you see, it's the same words. If you read this gospel lesson on a Sunday morning and you make the tone of Martha's voice and the tone of Mary's voice identical, or if you just read this gospel in a flat tone, you're missing a really important component. Martha's attitude when she comes to Jesus has to be, I believe, significantly different than Mary's. Mary falls on her face. In other words, she collapses onto the ground in tears, weeping from the bottom of her heart. Oh. I'm sorry, folks. It's for whatever reason, and it's probably because of the fact that it is difficult for us to. There's everybody in the world, because of this quarantine, is on the internet, and I keep losing the connection. So I don't know where it cut out, so I'm gonna have to back up a little bit here. Oh, and by the way, I just heard today, thank you Jesus, that I got this camera ordered early on, because all the webcam makers are sold out of cameras. So the fact that we got this and we got it right away and it was shipped right away, and we've been using it actually now for 3 weeks, is a real blessing, because you're going to have quite a waiting period to get them again. So, all right. It says that I'm recording, so I'm going to pick up that. So I'm just going to say that Mary's attitude and Martha's attitude, I believe, are significantly different. Martha's kind of miffed. She sent word, and he should have been there earlier, but he didn't get there. He didn't get there for at least 2 days longer than she expected. We don't know how long ahead of time she had sent word, but they had to go out and find Jesus wherever he was. They didn't necessarily know where he was or how far away he was, but apparently he was a 2 days journey from Bethany. So he gets the word, and that word may have been out there for a week or two, before it finally found him. But when it finally finds him, he doesn't leave immediately. He waits 2 more days, so that when he arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Now, Martha may have been waiting for 2 weeks. She may have sent word to Jesus way before Lazarus actually died, and she's been just going stir crazy, waiting for him to show up. Where is he? So that all that frustration comes out when she says, "Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died." But now here comes Mary, who's got a completely different attitude. She falls at Jesus' feet, weeping and crying out to him tender-heartedly, just like her heart has been ripped out of her chest. Her brother is dead. Lord, if you'd have been here, I know if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Now, this is the powerful verse for every confirmation student I've ever had thinks it's funny, and they think they're the first person that's ever thought to pick this verse to be their confirmation verse. But okay, verse 33, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." Okay. Now, another little thing. I said I wasn't going to do this, and you could go listen to the other one, but I guess I'm teaching it as I go anyway. And I'm looking at my time here, and I'm at about the 25-minute mark, so I'll probably end up having to break this, what I thought would be one video, into 2 videos. But I'll wrap up John 11 before I move on to John 12. But it says right here that what I'm seeing here is that these Jews, have to understand, they're important people. They're like leadership area. It says to me that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are prominent citizens. Okay? And it's important for the future to remember that. Okay? Now I'll try to read this all through here and get it done. Get through to the resurrection of Lazarus. So Jesus says to them, oh no, I'm sorry, I got to do this here. Because it says, so when he saw that they were weeping, and the Jews who came with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled and said, where have you laid him? And they said, Lord, come and see. And then John 11:35, the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. Now the question is, why did he weep if he knew that the reason he'd come was to raise him from the dead? There's a sermon. See how the sermons just pop right up? All right, verse 36. So the Jews were saying, behold how he loved him. But some of them were saying, could not this man who opened the eyes of him who was blind have kept this man from dying? Now Jesus, therefore, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, remove the stone. And Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days. And Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? And so they removed the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that you hear me. And I know that you always hear me. But because of the people standing around here, I've said it out loud that they might believe that you sent me. And after he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice and said, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped about with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. And many therefore of the Jews who had come out to Mary and beheld him and saw what he had done believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus had done. And therefore the chief priests and Pharisees convened a council and were saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs, and if we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him.